be like this.
What will it hold?
You're not going to fuss with your hair doing the news and the frizz.
It's going to fly the way it's flying.
You're just going to tell Carmen and it's going to be done.
It's okay.
As I said, my name is Selena, and I'll be your train conductor today.
I'm not going to go there and impress anybody.
A 1,200-acre park located on Powellhouse Island. Powellhouse is the largest and the northernmost of the 21 major islands that make up the swamp. Now, this railroad track we're currently riding on was built in 1999 and remains the only railroad track currently operating today inside the swamp. However, during the late 18 and early 1900s, this was not the case. The swamp saw hundreds of miles of railroad tracks all across it for the logging industry. I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Do you remember Trinity's friend in True?
Peter is still active in our park today. Her name is Sally. Sally is the dominant alpha female of this region, and that most region's house is actually an older one of hers. She hasn't used it in several years. But if you guys have a chance to walk down the boardwalk later, about halfway down to the gazebo on the left side, you will see a very similar heap. It'll be a little bit taller and a little bit fresher. That's her nest from just last September. Now we did count at least 16 that hatched from that nest, and we've been able to see at least 11 that are still with her as of fight and kill the father if he tries to eat them. And depending on what other food resources are available, he might. Now, the Okeefenokee Swamp is the headwater for both the St. Mary's and the Suwannee River. As we come over this bridge, you'll be able to see our man-made canal here where all of our boat tours take place. Now, if you were to travel left of that trestle, about 290 miles, and down the Suwannee River, it would take you about 10 days, but eventually you would reach the Gulf. Now, that's 10 days with no AC, no electricity. You're fighting the weather, bugs, and sometimes spiders the size of your hand. Now, luckily, you guys aren't going to see too many of those spiders out just yet, but pretty soon here in the summer, we will see hundreds of banana spiders lining right above the train tracks in between the pine trees. Now, they might look big and scary at first, but they eat a lot of horseflies, yellow flies, and mosquitoes. And for that, we are forever grateful. As I mentioned, during the late 18 and early 1900s, coming up on the left, you'll see a few cypress logs laid out and a log cart that would have been used to transport them. Now, one company that did pretty well for themselves out here was the Cypress Headward Company. They were here from 1909 to 1927 and cut down approximately 450 million board feet of cypress trees. That's enough to build 42,000 buildings. Now, most of what they would have cut down would have been called old growth. These are cypress trees that are anywhere from a few hundred years old to a couple thousand. They grow several feet in diameter, with their cypress knees growing up to 2 to 4 feet tall. Now, unfortunately, because the logging industry was so prevalent out here, but not very regulated, you guys aren't going to see hardly any of those old growth cypress left. Most of the cypress trees out here now are going to be quite skinny. And that's because they're not even 100 years old yet. So we call those new growth. Now I do try to keep everyone awake and engaged on my tours with the future of your questions, so I have my first one for y'all. Back in those days, workers had a pretty tough time out here. The conditions were not great, and they didn't get paid very well. So I want to see if y'all can guess how many dollars you think a worker made in one whole day worth of work. I'll go ahead and give you a hint. You only need one hand. So what do y'all think? Okay, I see a few guesses so far. I see a few people who are right. It was only $1 for an entire day worth of work.
That was my guess.
Now, it definitely was not a 9 to 5, and I can't imagine those benefits were too great. So I don't know about y'all, but I'd have something to say to management about that.